Well, we'll get started this morning. Still undetermined what we'll be doing, but just kind of keep that date open, June 8th. It might be for you, but for the rest of us, it's not. It just that way it fell. You'll manage. We'll we'll still do something for your birthday. So don't feel bad. All right, so that's June 8th. We'll uh, I'm trying to come up with something. May You're gonna have to get in here before he does, right, darling? So, oh Lord, the tea kettle is going off over here.
That is what it sounds like.
I know.
Hey,
Anyway, I forgot to turn my phone off.
Usually just kind of collapses when I start
Uh,
laughing. There were times
let me
I've quite literally fallen to the floor.
let me turn this
because I'm
off.
laughing.
All right.
Just
All right. So, like I said, June 8th, we'll probably try to do something indoors because it'll be kind of warm, maybe a little muggy, all that fun jazz. So, we're still trying to figure that out. Now, jumping back into, we're still in the book of Obadiah. As I'm sure many of you have already turned there. We're continuing our study here. Obviously, we're still talking about the transitioning or transcending vision of Obadiah. Went through all of these things, and last week we were hoping to get a little further than what we did, and we was only able to get their detriment. So we're in our portion of the study talking about how it's a tactical vision, how God's laying out how He's going to do what He's going to do to the nation of Edom. So we're and we'll find this down in verse 7, but we'll go ahead and read verses 6, 7, 8, and 9 once I put my eyeballs on. All right, so I can see. All right, verse 6 says, "How are the things of Esau searched out? How are his hidden things sought up? All the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee. There is none understanding in him. Shall I not in that day, saith the Lord, even destroy the wise men out of Edom, and understanding out of the mount of Esau? And thy mighty men, O Teman, or Taman, however you want to pronounce that, shall be dismayed at the end, that every one of the mount of Esau may be cut off by slaughter." And of course, like I said, we're talking about last week. We introduced this this thought of the tactical vision, and was it last week we introduced it or the week before? Can't remember. Anyway, we've been talking about the tactical vision, and then last week I know we talked about the detriment because I'm down on verse number 7 this morning. And just kind of quick review, we talked about the pridefulness is what brought about God's judgment upon them, which led to their demise. And then we talked about, going back and picking up our verse in Proverbs chapter 16, verse 18, where it says, "Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall." As that's the way, that's basically God saying that's what's going to happen if in this type of situation. There's going to always be something that brings about our detriment if we're not careful in how we live our life and so forth. And then we also talked about how a lot of times whatever it is that's in our life, whether it be some type of an addiction, some type of bitterness, or something like that, will usually always is something that will always bring about or something detrimental to us in our walk or in a relationship or whatever. There's 3 of us in here that saw something very toxic this morning on the way to church in front of Walmart in the car, and it was not it was not pretty. Old boys swerving all over the road and everything else, and they they had some issues, we'll say, but that could be one of those things that brings about their demise in that. So there's like I said, there's always going to be something in our life if we're not careful how we handle it, how we allow God to work that out of our life. If we're willing to let God work that out of our life, if not, then that could be what God uses to bring about some type of judgment against us, just as He did with pride in the nation of Edom. But today we're wanting to look at the thought of the double cross. And we see that in verse number 7. We'll reread that. It says, all the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee. There is none understanding in him. And like I said, this is the thought of a double cross. And if you read that, if you study that verse and you just kind of keep reading it over and over and over again, you'll start to see just exactly what God's talking about. This is something, a double cross is something that has been witnessed many, many times throughout history. I mean, how many of you can go back and watch different types of suspenseful movies, like the Mission Impossibles and that type of movie and different things where the plot line is that somebody thinks they have an ally and this ally comes back to double cross them, and they've just used them to put them in a position to where the true enemy could come in and take advantage and defeat them. I mean, that's what a double cross is. And that's kind of what God is saying here. He's saying, I know you've made alliances with different people in your area, in your region. And a lot of these people are going to be the ones I use to bring about your demise. They are going to be what is detrimental to you because in your mind, there's nothing to fear. There's nothing to worry about. I mean, just a kind of a simple little illustration of this. How many of you in school or in whatever profession that you do, how many have ever witnessed a friend or someone, coworker, or whatever, but you befriend come back and double cross you and become your now enemy? It happens. I mean, I go back to a situation. She probably doesn't even remember this, probably will now that I'm bringing it up. But I remember a time when Lori was working at her old store. And there was a back door, the guy that would check in vendors and stuff on the back door. He befriended a lot of the women in the church because he was, of that kind. He was gay and everything. And something happened. They somewhere along the line they got crossed up, and he obviously knew me from Lori. And oh boy calls me on the phone, trying to act like he's a driver for another company that delivers there, and is trying to tell me that my wife is cheating on me with him. Something stupid, just ignorant. And I could tell. I knew his voice. He did not he did not hide or change his voice in any way. But he had gotten mad at her over something stupid, something silly, and therefore he came back to try to double cross her. Of course, like I said, I knew his voice, and I knew it was a lie. And then I got off the phone with him. It really made me mad that he would even attempt to try to do something like that. But that's just an example of what we're talking about. A lot of times, those that we've the old saying. How many of you ever heard the old saying? Keep your enemies close, but what is it?
Keep your friends close, your enemies closer.
Right. Yeah, that's it. I knew it was something like that, and it just kind of popped in my head and was all scrambled. Thank you, guys. But that's kind of the way you have to do. I mean, even though you're keeping your friends, You just never know at what point in time a friend's going to wind up being a true enemy. And that's kind of what God's talking about here. I mean, if you look back, it says, all the men of thy confederacy. Well, when you think of the original term of this phrase confederacy, it doesn't. We're not going back to the Civil War here and the North and the South, but going back even further than that, somebody of your confederacy was considered to be an ally, someone that you all seen eye to eye on, and would kind of have each other's back. That's what he's talking about here. When the Bible's telling us all the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. So they're coming up, they're acting like they're going to go into, some type of battle or conflict or whatever with Edom. And then what does the Bible tell us? It says, the men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee. So here, on some made up scheme, Edom's coming out ready to go into battle with an ally, and then this ally turns out to be their true enemy and double crosses them, just like we've seen throughout history, throughout friendships and different things like that. But the scary thing about this is that a lot of times those places that we feel like we can go to and be safe and at peace with, there's a lot of times that double cross happens there. I mean, if you're going to war, if you're going to battle, if you're gonna rise up and somebody's done something to you and you're gathering your troops around those that has got your back, and then you're going up into this heated battle, heated whatever it is between you and someone else. A lot of times you'll come in, that's when you really find out who your true friends are. Because some of the people you've got that you think is on your side may turn out to not be on your side and everything else. But like I said, in that instance, and the unfortunate part about this is that not only is this true outside in whatever, social arena that we find ourselves in, but this is something that also happens within families. This is something that can also happen inside this church if we're not careful and we're not staying on our toes. I mean, you say, well, how can that be? How can that be in church? I mean, have you ever heard of a church splitting somewhere along the line? That's what happened. That the devil got in, some people rose up that everybody thought was on their side, and then next thing you know, these people go here and take this big swatch of people with them, and then a vast part of the church finds out they just been double crossed because these people they thought were on their side, they were going to stand with them for taking a stand for right, left. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, last year, tail end of the year of 2022, what happened with a major religious denomination that we all know. The Methodists split over, LGBTQ stuff. They split because some wanted to allow that in their pulpits, and the more traditionalists said no. They split. I mean, this is a denomination that split right down the middle and everything else. And now there's two Methodists, not just one. So like I said, just because we're Christians, just because we're family, does not mean that the devil can get in, wiggle his way in, and cause some type of conflict that's going to divide a place, divide a family, divide a church, divide whatever. anything he can get into, he's going to get into if there's an opportunity and a chance for him to get in and cause trouble and problems and so forth. So as we see, the double cross here, families and church families are not exempt in the least bit when it comes to a double cross. And we see here that God uses the friendliness of those close to Edom, and that's what he's talking about. I mean, these people were so close. You want to know how close the enemy was that took down the nation of Edom that God used? Look at the last part of this verse. It says, and they have prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee. There is none understanding in him. I mean, they broke bread together. They've went out to eat together. They've been over at each other's house and had meals together and so forth. And that's how a lot of times, I kind of hate to keep trying to sound like I'm sounding a warning, but this is big stuff right here. In this little insignificant little verse and this thought of a double cross, it's really something that if we're not as a church, if you're not as an individual careful, we can open ourselves up to an opportunity for the devil to get in and really cause a mess in our life. I mean, like I said, when he's talking about the people of thy confederacy, you're going to find out who this confederate. I know because I've studied ahead, and I don't want to give that away now for later. But we're going to find out who it was that God used. That was their confederacy that came in and everything else, and they were able to get in, befriend, and then double cross them and take them down. Then like I said, they had been to many different battles. They had been out on the battlefield and stood shoulder to shoulder, back to back, and supported one another and everything else. And then they come in and Edom gets double crossed. Just like a lot of times we can find ourselves if we're not careful in how we try to do what's right and everything. So we'll go ahead and try to jump down here in verse number 8, dealing with the destruction. Verse number 8 says, shall I not in that day, saith the Lord, even destroy the wise men out of Edom and understanding out of the mount of Esau. Now here it's interesting, or I find it to be somewhat interesting, because when we first read this, it kind of sounds like shall I not in that day. Kind of starts out like a question. But if you followed along and you've read in your Bible, you see that's not a question. It's more of a declarative statement. God's saying, shall I not in that day? Basically, God's saying it's not a matter of if, but it's just a matter of when I'm going to bring this destruction upon you, upon the nation of Edom. Just as many civilizations of today guard their leaders in times of battle. I mean, the White House, they have their little panic room up there for the president. The Congress has their little panic room that they will, scurry off to if an attack was to arise and come into Washington and everything else. That's the people have always, their leaders, we've always set up a defense to keep something bad from happening to them. It's not just here, it's everywhere. Every place has always done that. And it was no different here. When the Lord comes down and says, even destroy the wise men out of Edom. And and the understanding out of the Mount of Esau. So here we say they're wise men, the leaders that they look to lead them and to see what's out on the political horizon, so to speak. I don't know how prevalent politics was back then, but I'm sure in every civilization's run, there's been some sort of political, dealings. I mean, we see a lot of times with the nation of Israel, they would go in and enter into these covenants with different nations around them when God was taking them from here to there and stuff. So a lot of that was set up on a kind of a political, system. It wasn't fully political, but it was just a covenant between the nation of Israel and this one. They would perform like a treaty, and we won't mess with you if you don't mess with us, type of thing, and everything. So when we see all this here, just as the civilizations today, I'm sure it was somewhat similar to that in that day with the nation of Edom. They would, they're not so much mighty men, but they're political savvy men. They're the ones that could smooth talk and kind of smooth things over with someone else. I mean, there's been examples in the Bible, and I can't think of any right now, right off the top of my head. I mean, if you think of something, you can throw something out. I don't. I'm trying to think of just an example of someone coming up and using. Well, what was that one? It was in a study preacher did.
Doing that thing where he was talking about the person who's the servant who went up and fed the people, and he was the one who was doing. He was pretending like kind of like he was in charge and doing things in the name of the person who was working with. It was the guy with the bad leg and everything.
Mephibosheth.
Yeah.
Now, something like that. But I was thinking more of the one where it was one of the judges when the big, whichever one it was, he comes in and I'm pretty sure it was the one that sacrificed his daughter. Which one?
So that would be Jephthah.
Jephthah. When Jephthah was, and the warrior nation, the warrior tribe of, they got mad at Jephthah because he didn't ask them to come help him in battle and everything else. And Jephthah used his political savviness to smooth that situation over.
Jephthah actually fought the Ephraimites over.
Okay, so it was Gideon. Okay, I can't. All of that runs together in my mind, and so. But like I said, all of that, that was what happened. He used his political savviness to smooth that situation over, so as to not have, a situation between another tribe in the family. So, like I said, all of that, that's kind of what they did, and that's what Edom was doing here when they were smoothing over with their wise man. I believe what God is saying is the destruction would be so great when he's talking about, when he's going through this verse and saying that shall I not in that day, saith the Lord, even destroy the wise men out of Edom, the understanding out of the Mount of Esau. I mean, a lot of times we are a people, and I know one, near and dear to my heart, that always has to know why and what for and all this, that, and the other, when it comes to different things that we're going to do. A lot of times we're the same way when it comes to things of God, when it comes to things of our spiritual, walk with God. We want to know why this happened, why that happened. We've talked about it, and I've used this illustration before, of, a husband and a preacher who had a sick wife, and how she just kind of went through her little battles back and forth, and it got down to the point to where she was fixing to die. And in a moment of weakness, in a moment of love for his wife, the the husband kind of got down to the point to where he was going to be critical and talked a big talk about running into the throne room of heaven and demanding God tell him why his wife had to suffer the way she did here on earth and in their marriage and stuff, and how the wife looks at her husband and says, honey, it ain't going to matter in heaven. That's going to be the furthest thing from your mind when we get to heaven. It ain't going to matter what we went through here on earth when we get to heaven. That's the mentality. That's kind of what it is, and it comes down to with the destruction here. God is saying it's not going to matter how everything goes down. It's going to be so apparent that I brought a judgment against you that it's not going to be questioned how it happened. Because like we said, you go back and you think about how fortified a city that Petra was when Edom had control over it, and how it was growing, and just everything that was going on there, and how hard it was to get in. Like we said, you got to go through that little crack in the wall that they call the sick to get into. So you kind of had to have a reason to be going up in there. That's kind of like me. I give you a little illustration. Back when Destiny was born, I was working for this delivery company, and I had to go to Oak Ridge. I was delivered to Y12 over here. And I took this one package down to the receiving area where I was allowed to go. And the old boy says, I can't take this here. I'm like, what do you mean? He said, no. He said, this has got to go up there. I'm like, I can't go up there. He said, you got to take it up there. And I said, well, how do you get up there? He said, you got to go down Bear Creek Road. And I'm like, dude, I don't want to go down that road. If you know anything about Oak Ridge, that is the one road you better not get lost on. Okay? Because it's heavily guarded. So I come down, I go down to X10, I make the delivery over there, and then I come back up and have to get on 58, come up the turn on the Bear Creek Road, and then I'm going down through there. And it starts off little pavement, and it drops off on the gravel. And then it's gravel all the way up through there. And then you come up to this big silver building that's full of glass and everything else just sitting right there in a big paved circle area in front of it. And I'm just like, I'm sweating bullets the whole time I'm driving down through there. And I come out, and here comes this military guy. He's packing. I mean, he's full dress, full gear, finger just right outside the gun, the trigger guard, ready to shoot. He comes out, and he comes up to me and says, sir, what are you doing here? I said, I have a delivery. And he said, that's supposed to go down there. I said, I done been down there. He would not take it down there. He said it had to come up here. He said, well, what is it? And I reached over in the passenger seat, a little bitty manila envelope about like this. And it was bubble lined inside. I said, it's this. And he goes, sir, you know you're not supposed to be back. I said, trust me, I don't want to be here no more than you want me here. But this has to go here, and it's going to this individual. And I don't know who they are. It was some scientist. Oh, for somebody to be so brilliant, they really lack, social skills to say, hey, I've got a package that's coming today. Be on the lookout. No. I mean, you get sent down this road, dude, that you ain't supposed to be on. And you roll up here, and I'm like, here, this goes up here. And he says, wait right here. And he disappears inside, goes in, and they do their thing. He finds out, okay, yeah, I'm expecting a package. My bad. Sorry, I forgot to notify you. Blah, blah, blah. He comes back out and says, sir, you can turn around and go back out. He says, whatever you do not stop this vehicle and do not get off this gravel road. I said, yes, sir. I turned around and I went out. And as I'm looking in the mirrors, my mirror's here, As I'm looking in my mirrors, as I'm driving by, people are coming out of the woods, watching, making sure I don't stop or I'm not doing anything I'm not supposed to. And then they just recede right back up into the woods. Scary. I mean, it's this. You do not go down. That's what we're talking about here. When it comes to, you got to have a reason, a good enough reason to be coming into this place, and everything else. So for God to say, "I'm going to destroy," and I'm going to bring a complete and total end to it. Here He's saying it's going to be so vast. It's going to be so decisive. It's not going to be. History is not going to look back on it and say, well, that was an accident. It's going to be looked back on and say, somebody of a higher power caused this to happen.
How long before you were not doing that job?
I still done it for a little while after that, but like I said, it just when it comes to what God's talking about here, the destruction was so great to this nation that people today, now everybody has to try to try to explain away God. That's the whole big thing now. Everybody's trying to explain everything away from something that only God can bring and something that only God can do. But that's exactly what happened. God said it's going, and it's a lot of their explanations as why, could be here or there, doesn't matter. But God's going to bring a complete and total end to the nation of Edom. And we'll kind of keep looking at that. And next week we'll get down and talk about the dissemination of Edom. All right. Thank you. You are free to go.